All right, thank you all for coming. We'll go ahead and get started here. We're a few minutes behind schedule, but I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So as you all know, and I'm sure everybody in the room is concerned about blight. That's really the focus of this roundtable. That is why we came together today. As most of you know, I'm sure that I've been in office now just over a year. I just hit my 1-year anniversary of being first elected. And one of the very first things that I identified pretty early on in my involvement in politics was blight throughout our community. Specifically in my district, obviously we're sitting in Canonsburg. Blight's an issue in Canonsburg. Blight's an issue in the city of Washington as well. But it's also an issue, in some of the more rural communities as well. So it's been a focus for mine from the very beginning to bring some sort of group together to discuss kind of the strategies and ultimately what we can do about the issue of blight throughout our communities. That's really what this is all about. And I'll be completely honest, when I first thought about putting this together, it's really for a selfish reason because I personally don't know what all the strategies are out there. I've heard of some, I've researched some, but it was selfish in the sense that it's intended for me to come and learn about how I could help address this issue. I think you have some other panel members here today that are also interested in helping through their roles as well, and you'll hear about some of their options and some of the things that we could potentially do. Ultimately, what I'm trying to get out of this is, through my role, what can I personally do? Whether that's advocating for money at the state level, whether that's something more specific here locally, that's ultimately my goal out of this. That's what my focus will be as we hear the information and we continue to address this issue. I think blight is a very unique phenomenon. And I say it's unique in the sense that it's one of what you might call a key issue. And what do I mean by that? The key issue is it's one phenomenon that touches and affects so many other things. So, for instance, blight, as we all know, if you have a blighted property, not only is that blighted property most likely not contributing to the tax rolls of the municipality it's in, but it's also reducing the property values of the properties around it. It's making it less likely to market that and to turn it over into the future. It's potentially a haven for drug abuse or crime. It's potentially a situation where the police have to patrol that more often, so it's using more of our resources as well. So you have all of these different situations that blight, this one issue of blight, is affecting the surrounding area. In addition to that, just I guess finally, we had, and I don't recall exactly how long it was, maybe 2 years ago, we had a pretty obvious example in the city of Washington when it comes to blighted properties or unstable properties when the building collapsed 2 doors down from our courthouse right there on Main Street. So clearly it's an issue that needs to be addressed. I'm interested in figuring out how I could help potentially approach this in maybe a more aggressive manner than we have in the past. So with all of that said, let me just logistically, so for the panel members, we are recording this, so the House Republican Caucus is recording it. That's the cameras you see throughout the room. So because of that, the panelists, as you speak, we need you to actually speak into the microphone, even though the audience might be able to hear everybody. We only have a limited number of microphones, so we're going to have to share. When you use the microphone, make sure you press the center button that says push, and you'll see the green light turn on. That means the microphone's on. Thank you very much. Thank you, Senator. So with that said, I'd like to turn it over to Secretary Dennis Davin. Dennis is the Secretary of the Department of Community and Economic Development. I know blight has been an issue for the governor and his team through Secretary Davin. So we're honored that he could join us here today for this roundtable. So, Secretary, do you want to say any introduction words?
Yeah, thanks, Representative, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here and to be in in Washington County. I spend a lot of time here, probably more than more than a number of other ones. The other commissioner just gave me a thumbs up because he knows that. So I get invited here a lot, and for us in the state, we spend a lot of time, and I'm probably in the 4 years and 5 months, I think, John, somewhere around there. But in terms of being in this position, and one of the things that the governor really was interested in is to hear from the constituents in Pennsylvania, all throughout Pennsylvania. So not just staying in Harrisburg and developing programs, running programs and things like that, but what is the need that's out there in the community? So we've been traveling, and I've traveled, every county, a number of different municipalities, small municipalities, large cities. I was just in Philadelphia yesterday for a couple of days, but all throughout the state. And this is probably one of the biggest issues that we hear over and over again, because blight affects the smallest municipality to the largest city. And there are a variety of reasons. We have changes in population shifts. You think of the Mon Valley, from all the way from Pittsburgh, down to the West Virginia border, and it's a place that has been essentially decimated in terms of population. But you still have that housing stock, and you still have business, buildings and everything that are standing there. What do you do with all this? And that is probably the most significant concentration of blight that I've seen all throughout the state, if you can believe it. But there are other very significant issues around the state, and they've all been dealt with differently. And in some cases, it's so overwhelming, like the Mon Valley, that you would need billions and billions of dollars to demolish what you need to demolish. There are other situations where you have small communities that don't have the money to do that, because they have to put it into other infrastructure needs. So they do a little bit at a time. And the reality is, from the federal government, we don't see what we used to see 25 years ago with the community development block grant funds and things like that have been reduced. And I can tell you, it doesn't matter if there's a Republican in the White House or a Democrat in the White House, or what Congress is. It's every single administration, for the past 25 years. And it's just because there have been shifts in priorities. And unfortunately, this isn't one of the things that has been dealt with appropriately in my estimation on the federal level. So we've looked at this, and we've looked at kind of different ways of dealing with it. Representative, I'm glad you mentioned the fact that different communities deal with blight different ways, and there are some really good examples that are out there, and then there are other places that just don't know what to do. So, one of the examples that I see, and some communities have really worked to do this, is to get, hospitals and universities, the institutions, to invest in the downtown areas and take over some of these, just put, maybe even small businesses and things like that. And that is a great reuse of some of the buildings. It's a great way to get new investment, new buildings built in certain areas previous to their effort to do this, these universities and these hospitals have really been outside of the central business district. So things like that really help to deal with blight, but we think that it is going to take a much larger effort. The good news is that at the state level, there are a lot of really good proposals that are out there on dealing with this. And I know, Representative, this has been a big part of what you've been doing and some of the things that you've been promoting. I know Senator Bartolotta is promoting also some other opportunities to deal with blight related to natural gas extraction. A lot of you know that the governor's proposed a natural gas severance tax, and it's something that we're gonna probably continue to push. And we think that it's a great opportunity to really do something of scale, because from what I've seen, and again, I've seen a lot from the eastern side of the state to the western side of the state, it is such a massive problem, and we've been incrementally doing tearing down some homes a little bit at a time, and it's just not enough to deal with the situation. If anybody has been in McKeesport lately or whatever, John and I were there I don't know how long ago, maybe a month ago or something. They're tearing down 4 or 5 homes at a time. Same thing with Duquesne, and they probably need to tear down 1,000 or more homes to just get up to speed, and that's just not going to happen. So as the representative said, you run into issues. They are attractive nuisances, is what a lot of places call these, because kids want to hang out in them in these vacant and abandoned buildings and homes. So that needs to be dealt with. But from our perspective, from the governor's perspective, we need to deal with it in a big way, and that's why he's proposing something substantial and of substance like the Restore PA initiative. One other thing that I just want to point out, and I know a lot of folks around the table understand this and realize this, that we do live in the United States of America, and people have property rights, and that has to be respected. But it has to go both ways in my estimation. I think what has to happen is the property owner also has to respect the community within which they live, and you're not respecting the community by having a building where bricks are falling off the building, or the building is falling down, or housing that you're just sitting on to speculate until something better comes along, and it may happen or it may not happen. So that's also something that needs to be dealt with, and that takes legislation, but we have to be very careful about how that legislation is developed, because again, we have to respect property owners' rights. So that's something that we're also looking at too. But I just want to thank everybody, and thank you, Representative and Senator, for allowing me to be here and to talk a little bit about some of the things that we're doing.
Great, thank you, Secretary. And I'm glad you mentioned the issue with property rights. And I think just to clarify a point and maybe expand on that a little bit further, I could tell I personally am a huge proponent of private property rights, and I would not be a proponent of sacrificing those rights, if it's not an extraordinary situation. I think in most cases what I think of when I think of blight is truly abandoned type properties, or I think if the property isn't abandoned, in my mind, there are a number of avenues you could go to before you ever begin to talk about seizing somebody's true property that they continue to maintain to some degree. So with that said, why don't we go through, I would like to just go around the table for a few minutes and do some introductions. So if you could introduce yourself, what your role is, and potentially even what your experience, and I think we have varying amounts of experience when it comes to blight, just so everybody in the room understands where we're all coming from. So Commissioner, if you don't mind starting.
Harry Maggi, Washington County Commissioner.
Cameron Bartolotta, State Senator. And I don't want to hold up the roll call too long, but just to throw things out there, when I first was elected in 2014, I was on the Urban Affairs and Housing Committee. And after I was on that for a few months, my staff said, nobody asks to be on that. But the reason I wanted to be, because I felt it was vital, being where I come from. I represent from Aliquippa to Bobtown. So we have a large number of blighted communities that are in dire need of help. There are two different pieces of legislation that have been signed into law that I was co-sponsor of, and these are things that we needed to address legislatively because, again, when I was first elected, I had 2 bus tours. I brought the Urban Affairs and Housing Committee to my district on a charter bus and drove them through Monongahela and Denora and Charleroi and New Eagle and even Monessen. Even though Monessen's not in my district anymore, that was the first phone call I made when I took office, because the big reason that lit a fire under me to run was that my daughter was a student at Ohio University, and she went on it was spring break, and she said, I have a sorority sister going on a mission trip for spring break. I said, well, God bless her. Where's she going? Cuba? No, Monessen. They were sending missionaries to Monessen. So I said, okay, that's it. So we have issues with blight because we have laws on the books. Thank goodness they're there to protect the owners. But when someone owns a property for decades and they pass away, who does it go to? There's fights within families, and it sits there empty with the roof caving in and trees growing through for years. Sometimes it's difficult to get those properties into the hands of someone who can do something. You can't touch it for sometimes 5, 7 years. That's ridiculous. We have to do something better, and we are doing things. We're passing legislation to speed those things up, to hold absentee and delinquent landlords accountable. They have to sign things ahead of time, have a We're trying to make it so that these incidences don't occur in the future, but what do we do now? So, there are many, many things, and I'm sure the commissioners are going to talk about LSA funding and how that's been a huge benefit, and to leverage help for communities to deal with a blight situation. Last thing is that before I pass it along, just a perfect example in Mariana. I'm on the LSA board, and 2 years ago, I think, we decided, look, we're going to help out this tiny little coal town that just really doesn't have a lot. With $100,000, they were able to raise 10 buildings. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. But again, lastly, that's the last thing you want to do, is to just demolish a building. We have to get there before that happens. That's like saying if you've got a tiny little cancerous tumor, let's wait until, it's 10 times the size. No, you want to get it out immediately, because 45% of the 911 calls occur because of a blighted property or immediately surrounding it. So as to the representative's comment about it's not just an eyesore, it's a cancer in a community. So I'm thrilled that we're still pushing forward and trying to make strides to do something about this before it becomes a hazard in a community, before it reduces property values. So I'm proud to say that we're really moving forward with some legislation that should help speed those processes up.
Bill McGowan, I'm the Executive Director of the Redevelopment Authority for Washington County, and we have a number of programs that we're working with to combat blight, either prevent it or do it in terms of demolition, and we do that on behalf of the 3 commissioners, and so that we can make communities better off, and we can talk about that as we go here.
Scott Putnam, Mayor of the City of Washington, and as they've mentioned, the LSA funding, the Community Development Block Grant funding, there's just been a very big help to the City of Washington. When I took office 3 years ago, we had over 42 houses on our residential demolition list, and through the help of LSA and CDBG, we're down to less than 15 houses on that list now, but more continually get added. We've also spent a number of our dollars in home rehabilitation and downtown business facade improvements, so to try to cure blight in our downtown and in our neighborhoods as well. So it's just been a great help.
I'm Ron McIntyre. I'm the Code Enforcement Officer for the City of Washington, and we do have a big blight problem in the City of Washington. The front page of today's paper had a house that was set on fire. There's several others that were suspected of arson as well. So it's a major problem in the city, and we've been working to get them demolished and try to clean up the city. The home rehab program is also very helpful to try to get the properties fixed up so they don't get to the point where they do have to be demolished. So thanks.
Good morning, Rachel Wilson. I'm with Representative Cook's office. 49th District is parts of Washington and Fayette County. It doesn't just, there is no county line, no lines drawn that prevent blight from anywhere. So we have it in both counties. So.
Great, thank you all for the introductions. Why don't we we're going to begin the discussion with actually a presentation from Bill McGowan in what the Redevelopment Authority has been doing to combat blight and some of the resources available. We kind of have this scheduled for really the next hour and a half. The way I envision it, assuming Bill you don't mind, is we really use Bill's presentation as a kickoff to just a discussion about how we're going to help this issue. We loosely have his presentation scheduled at a half an hour and then an hour for question and answer. As long as you're okay with it, Bill, I think just opening a discussion through his presentation is probably the best way to approach it. So with that said, feel free to ask questions, as he goes along. And then, once we get through kind of the discussion on his presentation, we'll open basically open to any questions at that point. So, Bill?
Sorry. Test one. Got it. Okay. We have a presentation that will be available if you want it, for a copy of it or anything like that. But just let me go through a couple of the programs that we have in place, and please ask questions as we go. We've been addressing blight since we were formed back in 1956, I think it is. And so it has taken a lot of different forms, but I totally agree with Camera and Tim in the fact that we try to get at it before it happens. And so several of the programs are home improvement programs, and you've already heard Scott mention rehab programs, and we have, for instance, 3 home improvement programs. One's a rehab program where it takes folks low income. We can give them up to $25,000 to repair things that they need to repair, and they have a forgivable mortgage that they have to stay in the house for 10 years, and it goes away. And for instance, on that rehabilitation program, since 1977, we've rehabbed 2,470 homes. Wow. So that's keeping those homes livable, keeping people in the homes so that they pay their taxes and have some place that's livable, that they don't have to run off to a nursing home or something like that. And so, and we've gotten innovative as far as getting money for those. When we started it, we used some of the CDBG program monies, some of the home monies that we get. Since then, we've used the LSA, which has been very good as far as every year the LSA committee will say, yeah, we like this program. You've accomplished so many houses with our money last year, so let's do it again. And so that program's been in effect the entire being of the LSA program, and that's worked very well. We've also taken to the Federal Home Loan Bank, and we get a grant we've been doing it every year now for about 4 years now, to get a couple $100,000 that allows them to give us money to get more rehabs on the list. And geez, we'll have to go back, and Rob, you can help me out here, but back 5-6 years ago, we had a waiting list for home rehab for people in the county that was about 7-8 years long before you could work your way up. Well, now with the help of LSA monies and the help of Federal Home Loan Bank, et cetera, now some of those lists are coming down substantially. If you're county-wide, you're probably still going to wait a few years, but it's come down substantially so that keeps those kind of things on the tax rolls, keeps a building from being blighted. We're also, when we do that, we're looking at code deficiencies, and we're looking at energy efficiencies as to what kind of furniture you put in the house if it needs replaced. Lead hazards, which is a real pain, but you got to do it with the federal laws that are in place. So that program's really been well done. Now, the second program that we use is called Access Program, and that is for, again, low to moderate income families, permanently disabled residents. So, and that increases their accessibility to their home with like ramps or getting up to the front door, or walk-in, roll-in showers that we can replace. So again, that keeps people in their houses. And this also, even if you're a renter, you can get that kind of thing done. So it keeps people in their houses, keeps them independently living. And then we have another program called the Countywide Home Buyer Assistance Program. And again, that was established year 2000, again, low to moderate income. And that helps first-time home buyers purchase a home. And over the years, we've assisted 96 families to get into their homes with doing that program. Now, question to start with, it's the whole home rehab program, and just what I talked about, it's not easy. It's a very laborious evolution that you have to go through. So that's one of the areas probably where we could help address things, is to make it a little smoother. Don't have all the regulations, don't have all the steps you gotta go through to verify income and to, and we have a staff of about 3 to 4 people that work on it continuously, and they do a fantastic job, but you've gotta keep at it and keep doing it very, very meticulously. Let me talk a little bit about the Highland Ridge project that we initiated. It's been 2002 or so we initiated that. And in the city of Washington, we actually, in the Highland Ridge area, bought 52 parcels, tore down 22 structures that were needed torn down badly. And so far, we've constructed 17 new homes, and we've got 3 more to go that will complete that project. Now, that was not easy, and if we had it to do over again, we probably would do it a little differently, because we went into that Highland Ridge area. We said, okay, throughout the area, what homes do we need to tear down that need so you can get some lots to build homes? But we also found out that if you can't we weren't tearing down all the homes. So some of them were good, but it's hard to say, okay, let's do this over here and this over here and this over here. It's almost better to say, okay, let's tear down the whole block. Let's take a whole block of homes. So that you have to trade that off in doing what you're doing. But we've had a great success in putting 17 new homes in that area. Elderly housing. We have a total of 536 units that we have, in addition to the Housing Authority having some for elderly folks. And the reason I bring that up is for 2 reasons. One is that there's a lot of folks that want to downsize that need to get into an elderly facility, and then that home that they're in can then be sold, kept on the tax rolls, et cetera. The other thing is that we have 9 facilities throughout the county, different places in the county, and most of those facilities were built or purchased on land that was blighted. For instance, the old Holiday Inn that's out by the Crown Center, that was in bankruptcy, and we took that facility way back when. It was 1994, I want to say. We took that facility, bought it out of bankruptcy, and then rehabbed it, and now it's a beautiful elderly facility with 79 units of elderly housing in that facility, and it's gorgeous. So that kind of thing, if you can take property that's blighted and then make something out of it, we've been able to do that considerably, and we keep the facilities nice enough that we have waiting lists to get into all of our facilities. Even the facilities that were built in Cannonsburg here with Cannon House and in Shar House down in Charleroi, those are now 30 years old. So think about that. And we've got staff that maintain those houses and those facilities, and site managers that keep the rooms full and the lists growing. And so that's worked out very well. And I challenge you to go into any of our facilities, and they are beautiful. They're people love to live there, and it's a great place for aging in place. So let's see here. And again, we've got like 9 facilities all over the place. Neighborhood Stabilization Program. This was a program that was put in place back in 2008, right after the housing market went boom. And the state came up with this program, and we were able to get $1.5 million worth of grant to go to foreclosed homes that needed rehabbed and getting back on the tax rolls, et cetera. And so we started out with $1.5 million grant. We purchased and rehabbed 21 properties, got them back on the tax rolls, sold them to eligible buyers, and we targeted the city of Washington and Charleroi Borough. And through that whole process with 21 properties, with the money we got from selling them, we were able to create $1.2 million worth of sales proceeds that went back and did more houses. So that's where we came up with the 21. And just recently, the state gave us some more money that was money coming back to them through this program that wasn't used. And so we got another $283,000 here just this past year, and we're gonna do 3 more homes. So that's, you know, great use of money, good program, and it gets the homes back on the tax roll so they're not blighted. The Summerlee Avenue project down in the city of Washington, we had a row of 7 houses that Slovenia Bank, I think it was, yeah, Slovenia Bank owned because they were getting blighted and most of them were empty. And so Slovenia Bank came to us and said, you know, do you want these properties so we can tear them down and build something in place? And we said, yeah, let's give it a shot. So we took the properties, helped Slovenia Bank get the whole mess off their rolls. There were 7 houses, we demolished all of them, and then put 2 beautiful new homes in place of those 7 homes, and actually then added a 3rd home in the back on another lot that, again, went to eligible home buyers, that's low to moderate income home buyers, and now you got those 3 homes there that are beautiful in a residential area that helps, you know, and that was a good example of getting rid of blight, and we did it. So that's worked out very well. Let's go code enforcement demolition. Now, one of our philosophies is you do that as a last resort, and that's been mentioned 2 or 3 times already, is that you do that as a last resort. You don't want to demolish houses. But when it gets so far along, for instance, going back to the rehab program I talked about with the 2,400 homes, sometimes somebody's on the list, they'll come, okay, your time is coming, okay, let's go check it. And you go to the house and you say, oh dear, it's just so far gone with so many discrepancies that you gotta demo it. You don't wanna waste $25,000 putting it into the house when it's gonna fall down anyway. So you have to demo it, and then you've gotta, okay, figure out where those folks go, what kind of, you know, can they come to one of our elderly facilities or something like that. But code enforcement is a definite program that has to be put in place by the municipality. And Cameron mentioned Mariana. Well, yeah, we started helping them, what, Rob, 5 years ago now or so? And because they came to us, they came to us, we went to them, and we could see, oh, geez, yeah, some of these houses are shot. And so, but guess what? They did not have a code enforcement officer on staff or hired. They did not have a code enforcement program in place. So we started from ground zero and said, okay, how do we help them get that process in place so that then they can determine what houses need fixed, what houses need torn down. So we've been doing that through the LSA and through some other grants and so we're well along with tearing down a good portion of there's houses that they have on the list for tearing down. And that, you know, and that goes back to another thing. Some of those houses, you're saying, geez, the yellow brick homes, they're nice and solid, you know, can't we fix them up? Man, you know, you can't go in, if you're gonna sell a house for $30,000, you can't, you gotta go through the drill that says, do you really wanna put, you know, $80,000 or $100,000 into it to make it sellable for 30? So we go through that evolution, and that needs to be something that's in place that says, okay, at what point do you say, okay, demo it instead of, and so some of those houses we demo, and then they'll hopefully become side yards for the next door neighbor. So we've got that in process. Another thing that I'll mention that needs to be pushed and looked at, and the state funding would help in this case too considerably, and that's land bank. The commissioners have designated, said they want a land bank, and they have designated the redevelopment authority to be that land bank. And so we have a land bank in place for the County of Washington. And so what we do is we go looking for properties that have some value that we can do something with. Land bank is not going to be a repository for all the bad properties. Can't do it. But you can be the repository for properties that can be turned around, can be rehabbed, or can be cleared off totally and sold to the side yard folks. Or maybe there's somebody that wants to build a building and they just need the gob pile cleaned up. So that's how we see as the land bank functioning, and it's been in place a little over a year now, and we feel it's doing very well. We're working
Bill,
on.
sorry to interrupt, but can you, for anybody who might not be familiar with the concept of land banking, can you just go into a little bit more detail of
Yeah.
what that means?
Yeah, Rob. Land bank is a law that's went into place here like 2 years ago, and you can form this facility, form this entity as a separate entity, or in our case, under the redevelopment authority, and it has the capacity to go buy properties that are about to go into judicial sale. Now, there's gonna be a quiz here. The first sale, if you're not paying your taxes, it takes a year, and your property will be liened for the taxes you don't pay. And then the first sale that comes up is the upset sale. And that happens essentially 2 years after you quit paying taxes. And the upset sale still has all the tax liens on it, still has all the mechanical liens, federal, state liens, et cetera. Then the following year, if nobody buys it, because it's probably got too many liens on it, then the following year you go to the judicial sale. And that's the sale where the taxes, not the federal and state, but the local taxes get wiped off, and so do the mechanical liens. And so that's where you get the people, the speculators that come in and say, oh, I'm going to buy this property. The guy lives in China or something, and he's going to buy the property, but then nothing happens to it. So if that property has the value to do something with, the land bank has the capability to come in and buy that property before judicial sale and do something with it. What else do I want to mention, Rob, land bank wise?
Bill, let me jump in for a second.
Yeah.
I think one of the real good points of a land bank is, number one, you can only do it if you have 10,000 in a community.
Right.
So we only have probably a couple communities in Washington County that could have formed their own land bank. City of Washington, I believe, and Peters Township probably. But so the county did it on a county-wide basis so that anyone can apply. And we work directly with communities because bottom line, you can take buildings down, you can do blight removal, but if you don't have a plan, then what do you do with it? So basically, each of the communities have signed up, and we're signing up as we go. Find a reason why they would need a building or a few buildings in an area for a plan to help that community grow. And by working with coordination with those local communities, the land bank organization can go in and do it. Once they get a property, they then can sell the property, and when the property proceeds come in, that goes back into the land bank to keep it going, just like you mentioned on some of the other programs.
Yeah, and we make it loud and clear that we want to buy properties, but we want to buy the properties that will do some good to put back on the tax rolls and that have a plan, like Harlan says. You got to have a plan. Well, what are you going to do with that property? you're not gonna just go out and buy a slag pile and say, well, okay, we'll buy the slag pile. It's gotta have something to,
There's actually criteria that we put into place.
Right.
So if you want to put a property into the land bank, it has to meet the criteria that we've already put into place. And it's always repurposing.
And were those criteria that was established when the county authorized it?
Correct. We established the criteria when we established the land bank.
Okay, great.
so it's working very well right now. So we don't have as many municipalities as we'd like yet. We need another half a dozen or more municipalities and school districts, et cetera, to come in, and that way we can help them with their properties, yeah. Any other questions on the land bank? Be glad to talk to you. Rob's our key guy. Rob Phillips is our key guy on land bank, and he gets it done, so. Code enforcement and demolition, just a couple of things. Last 5 years, 124 blighted structures removed, demolition. Countywide, that's countywide. 1.7 million in CDBG and LSA funds the last 5 years, and $475,000 in CDBG and LSA allocated to demolition, yeah. Another area that we have gotten into with a number of the boroughs and cities is the downtown revitalization. And the city of Washington here back in 2005, we took a 12-block area and redid the streets and the sidewalks and put utilities underground, et cetera, okay? And now, does that really help? Well, we think it does. You always can use more help because you need more tax base and more buildings in downtown that'll have good, vibrant businesses in it, and so that's a continual evolution working on it. But we've helped Denora and California, Canonsburg, Charleroi, Monongahela on that. Now, another area that I'll mention just very briefly is brownfields. The Redevelopment Authority has been in the brownfield business, again, for almost since existence, but really with vibrance probably since about the year 2002 or so. And so we actually have an inventory of brownfields throughout the county. It's about 140 sites right now that we have on inventory. But again, we're not going to attack those brownfields unless there's something to do with that we can revitalize the property. But we've helped a number of communities take out, like old gas stations, take out tanks and that sort of thing. We've helped, well, right now we're in the process with the old Brockway Glass site that you see on Route 70 when you're going west down toward Claysville. You'll see on the big old tank and the big smokestack and so on. Well, we're working with Crossgates and helping put a good access road in there that will take 18-wheelers, and they're going to tear down the building and build something very nice there as far as industrial use and bring in some jobs. So that's a good example for brownfield. You work in the brownfield stuff and getting rid of something that looks like the devil and will bring jobs and good businesses. We have a brownfield assessment program so that we can actually help do phase ones, phase twos to see what's there. Is it bad? Is it just a little bit bad? Whatever. How do we fix that? We also have a brownfield loan program for revolving loan that'll help companies get rid of what's there, and it's a loan, so they pay it back, and then we can reloan the money. So that's good too. Conclusions here, and then I'll open it up here. Essentially, there are programs we feel that exist to address neighborhood blight and revitalization, but there's still a lot more that can be done, as Tim and Cam are talking about. If you can do more to help fund some of these programs and to get some new programs, like there's been a lot of discussion already about, oh, geez, it takes so long to get somebody to cut their grass. If they're not, how do you cite them? And 6, 8 months, 2 years later, they're still, going through the program of how do you get them to cut the grass, so that kind of thing. We've been doing it for a long time, and we feel we do it well. it's really only limited by funding. Really only limited by funding. Couple of recommendations would be to do more funding to address blight and take some of the programs that we've talked about. One of the things that could help state funding wise is doing land banks, doing some funding for the land banks from the state funding, because right now we get funding from the county, we get funding from selling properties, we get funding if we're putting a property back on the tax rolls, then we get the 50% of the taxes, the real estate taxes, for 5 years. That helps to establish the land bank and keep it going. Okay, so that's a recommendation.
You're saying on a state level?
On a state level, there could be some monies that could help the land bank, I think, get established, get some staff time, et cetera. Because the land bank, the redevelopment authority staff are the ones that are running the land bank.
So Bill, that was going to be my question that you kind of stole the answer to, but yeah, you've talked about community development block grants. That's a federal program, from my understanding. You talked about LSA. You talked about the federal home loan grants. You just mentioned county funding. I'm just trying to understand what all the different avenues are for your funding. You've talked about a few of them, but are you getting, what type of county, and maybe the commissioners could answer this as well, but what type of county funding are you getting for these various programs? And what, if any, you really haven't, other than requesting some state money, you haven't really talked about any direct state funding. Are you getting any, I guess, is ultimately my question.
Yes, we have, and yes, we do. For instance, land bank, though, no, we don't get any. Again, that's county and what we get turned over coming back in. For instance, I mentioned the access program, which was the handicap. That was a state program to start with, and that got it kind of going. And then since then, we've been using some of the Federal Home Loan Bank grants that we get and some of the local share grants that we get to help fund that access program. But there's no state money going into that now. It started with state, and then we kept it going from that. Some of the rehab programs we've gotten state funding a couple of times, for instance, to help rehab some homes in the west end of the city of Washington. And that was state monies that were special grants to help certain areas, okay? That's gone away, but we still put money into it from the LSA and Federal Home Loan Bank, et cetera.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to address what you had said about the 50% thing. I'm looking here, and I was a co-sponsor, and this was signed into law on last year, June 18th. Act 33 allows for counties to designate redevelopment authorities as land banks, allowing for greater flexibility in combating blight, redevelopment authorities to possess powerful tools previously available only to land banks, such as acquiring tax delinquent properties at judicial sale without competitive bidding, discharging tax liens on those properties, and sharing up to half the real estate taxes for 5 years after their conveyance.
Right.
That was signed into law last June.
Right, and that
Is that something you're able to benefit from? Obviously.
we do because we've already formed the land bank.
Right.
That's for counties that don't have a land bank yet and would rather do it through the redevelopment authority. Well, our county commissioners have already done that.
Right, but it says here sharing up to half the real estate taxes for
Yes.
5 years.
Yes.
So that's something
And
you do already.
That's what,
Okay,
that's what
last question.
That's what we have in place right now.
Okay.
From the land bank.
Got it.
And that's good in the fact that it helps fund the land bank.
Mm-hmm.
But it's tough when you ask a school district, even though you can tell them, hey, right now you're not getting anything, things blighted and they're not paying taxes. So let's get it back on the tax rolls and at least get 50% to start with. Well, a lot of the school districts, especially, and municipalities will come back to you and say, we don't have much money anyway. We'd love to get this a lot more than, we'd like to get 100% of the taxes coming back on the rolls.
Okay.
And so we work with them and say, we gotta do it.
Last question I had. correct me if I'm wrong, I do know that there was legislation passed that would allow, not demand, but allow counties to charge a fee per real estate transaction up to $15. I think it was a $12 or $15. And that fee would go into a fund to use for blight remediation. Is that something we're taking advantage of in Washington County? And how much has that helped, if any?
We're not taking advantage of that now. Actually, we're putting $150,000 from the county funds already into the land bank to pass seed money to move forward with that. So that was our action we've taken 2 or 3 years ago at this point. We haven't gone into that next taxing bracket, and we're
No,
doing it
there
strictly
is-
from what we're doing within the county now.
There is a fund that went way, in place way back when, geez, I forget when now, but called Act 137 monies. And that's the same kind of thing, that's before what you're talking about, the $15. And that money then is collected by the Recorder of Deeds and is used for affordable housing projects. So it's not what you're talking about, but it's kind of that same kind of money that can help in affordable housing, and so it's the same kind of thing, yeah.
Bill, I want to just mention, along with what the senator said there, maybe explain a little bit about the liens whenever it goes into the land bank. We have to work with the school districts to get those old liens, which sometimes create a problem when not being able to get rid of the property house. Those are forgiven, and whenever it goes into
Yeah,
the
some of
land
the
bank.
liens you have to go back and essentially negotiate with, say, federal, state, saying, okay, we really want to get rid of some of these liens. And some of the liens, especially from the federal and state, might not be just on that property. It might be on all 10, 15 properties that this owner owns. And so if you can get rid of some of the ones that are there because we want to do something with the property, then that'll help us get not just only the judicial sale help, but then a next level that says, okay, we can do this and get rid of the federal and state. And yeah.
You're usually
Right.
pretty successful at that, too. I mean, we have pretty
yeah.
good relationships with
Yeah.
most of the taxing entities.
Yeah, yeah.
I'd just
And
like to say the city of Washington has also used a pocket of money from the state through the DCED program, through the NAP and the NPP program, which is a state tax credit program, where businesses look in need of a state tax credit, will pledge money to the city in exchange for a state tax credit program. And through our Citywide Development Corporation, we've been very fortunate the last 2 seasons to be awarded that tax credit program, which we're using for home rehabilitation and programming at parks and playgrounds.
Yeah, just real quick, I'm glad you brought that up, Mayor, because that's probably one of the best programs that we have right now going. And thanks to the senator and the representative, I think you were here when that was increased, but that was doubled from $18 million to $36 million. Still a drop in the bucket as to what's needed, but it was very helpful, and it's being used. And Washington County and the city of Washington does it probably as well as anybody I've seen, throughout the state. That's a great program because, again, as the mayor said, that is businesses that are in the community reinvesting in the community, and we provide a tax credit to back that up. But again, it's helpful, but probably not enough to fully take care of the situation. The other thing I want to mention is that some of the other programs that Bill talked about with respect to brownfield redevelopment, and that's my background is with that in Allegheny County, working for the Allegheny County Redevelopment Authority and the county and then the city also. But that's critical. These brownfields, in a lot of cases, give us a great opportunity to do a couple things. One is to attract retail entertainment type venues when they're on water, when they're in interesting places that are no longer suitable for industrial development. And we take that very seriously. We think, and we like to actually provide funding for even speculative development to clean those brownfields up, even before you know what's going to happen there, because you're cleaning up the environment, but you're also preparing that site for development. But the bigger thing right now is the fact that we have a tremendous opportunity that we've been working on for the past over 4 years now, related to downstream opportunities from all the shale development that's taken place, all the natural gas and natural gas liquids that are being extracted. And that is a great opportunity. And I can tell you, I'm headed to Texas next week for a couple of days to meet with industry representatives and also to meet with site selectors. And these are the groups that actually help companies decide where to locate throughout the country. And the fact that we have the feedstock here and the fact that we have the end users here and more plastics manufacturers and others want to be here in this particular area, because of that, sets us up very, very well. I can tell you, when we started talking about this in Texas 4 years ago, after we did a study that looked at the downstream opportunities from the shale activity, natural gas and natural gas liquids, we talked about that. I made a presentation in front of the international media about Pennsylvania, in particular southwestern Pennsylvania and the northern tier, and we were laughed at. I was laughed at, which, has anybody been laughed at when you're speaking in front of a big group? You're doing it right now. But not a great place to be. So, but we continued at it every single year, and I'm usually in Texas a couple times a year, Houston, Dallas, and some other areas, San Antonio, where the World Plastics Expo was this year. But we kept at it every single year, making that presentation and hammering that home to now nobody's laughing. And they're certainly not laughing because they're a little nervous about where we are right now. And they're nervous about the fact big old Texas is number one in natural gas production right now. Pennsylvania is number two. And we are only number two by a slight margin. And at some point in time, very soon, we're going to overtake Texas. Regardless of anything you hear, regardless of anything that's going on, we're going to overtake Texas. And we want to be able to take advantage of those opportunities and really do what we can do on the state side to prepare sites for development, to make sure that we're working with these companies, to make sure that we deal with any pipeline infrastructure issues, and there are a few of them. Unfortunately, they're mostly around one pipeline manufacturer, one pipeline developer, but there are some issues like that. But Pennsylvania is in a great position right now to attract potentially additional cracker plants. Definitely downstream opportunities with plastics, with fertilizer, with a variety of different things that would utilize natural gas and natural gas liquids. So I just wanted to put that out there, that that's a big part of what we would like to see happen. And this is, as you guys know, this is, what do you call yourselves, the energy capital of the world, something like that? Of the East, okay. You should say the world. I mean, I think I've heard you say that a couple times, Larry, but yeah, so we want to take advantage of that here.
Great, thanks for that, Secretary Davin. I'm actually glad you brought that up. I know it's been a focus of the House in particular, and I imagine from the Senate as well. I know of one bill in a package of bills that I'm aware of, and I believe it's Representative Nelson's bill, will actually approach the permitting process of brownfield sites in particular, and have them permitted for various types of opportunities in the future, which we think could help with that effort. I'm very glad to hear that it's a focus of the administration and of your department as well, as we move forward. I'd like to turn to, we've talked a lot about the states and what the state is doing. We've talked about what the county is doing. Let's turn and make it a little bit more local. We have two representatives from local communities here, and Mayor Putnam, I'd like to give you the opportunity, but I also know that Blight has been a focus of Eric Chandler, who sits on the council here in Canonsburg. So I want to turn it to both of you gentlemen and talk, if you could, about some of the efforts you've been doing in regards to Blight. I know for a fact Eric it's been his focus, and what you see more of a local level as far as the things that are working well, and as well as what the challenges are moving forward. So whichever one of you wants to start,
Yeah, Representative, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. First off, from the city's perspective, I think the creation of the Citywide Development Corporation went a long way, and that went back to 2011 and Act 90, which was the original land bank regulations, and it allowed us to do some of these things. We were without funding. We were an all-volunteer board looking at some opportunities until we recently got the NPP. But this goes back to 2012, made an agreement with the City of Washington through the CDC and the Washington School District to forgive back taxes on people that had an unwanted property. If they wanted to donate a property that they didn't want anymore, they took it from a parent or an uncle, that the school district would forgive the back taxes, the city would forgive the back taxes, and then a proceed of the sale would go back to the school district. And it took, as you mentioned, a long time to get the school district to see that they were getting zero tax dollars. And now on a sale of one of those flip properties, they'll get 25% of the proceeds of the sale. So, and it took them a long time to see that they were getting nothing, and now they're at least have an opportunity to get something. We've done a couple of properties in the city through that program and have done more since the NPP program has been in place. But that also allows us through the NPP to supplement the Redevelopment Authority's home rehab program. We're working with Pastor Aaron Miller and Life Church and doing a summer, as the senator mentioned, a mission trip. There's several high schools that send kids to the city of Washington every summer. Life Church puts together programs where professional contractors are helping these kids learn a skill. They're cleaning up properties, and they're properties that don't fit the Redevelopment Authority's guidelines for the home rehab program. So they don't fit your mold bill, but there's something that we can do to help before they get too bad that they have to go on our demolition list. So that's some of the things that we're using just with our CDC. But, you know, I think our biggest challenge in the city right now is the high percentage of rental properties. 57% of our housing stock is rental occupied. So as you talk about a grandparent that needs to go into assisted living and they turn the house over to their children, their family members, instead of putting that house back on the market, they're holding it as a rental property. And when we lost all the jobs back in the 80s, when the steel mills all left, well, the younger generation left with it and left mom and dad in a house in Washington. Well, then now that mom and dad are passing on, we'll just keep the house as a rental. They don't live here, and there's a lot of concerns. And I think that's, Ron, probably one of our biggest issues is these rental houses and keeping the blight up, because those people, it's not theirs. They don't care. The pride isn't there, when you don't own the property. That's probably where we're at so how when you move somebody into an assisted living facility or one of your senior housing, what can we do to incentivize family to put the house back on the market instead of holding it as a rental property? And how do we, as the city, incentivize home ownership to the point that they don't want to be a rental property anymore?
Well, thank you, and I'm glad you mentioned Life Church. You know, I had the opportunity just recently to meet with Aaron Miller and actually Todd Ashmore, who's in the audience here, in their relationship with the Dreamers Company, which I think is the company that does a lot of that work throughout the city. So just want to give them a shout out. So Eric, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So this is actually my second year on council. And through the process of, we actually 3 months ago actually signed on with the land bank with Rob, and working through right now is getting the challenge of showing the school board the benefit of the land bank, and I think that's been a challenge, but hopefully we'll cross that bridge by the end of June. And the first thing is really going through and inventorying the properties that we have are blighted is the first step. And then that process of researching, but again, with Rob's help, it's been, so right now on the list, there's probably about 27 properties that are blighted, 2 of which are now condemned because it's beyond the point of repair. So I think that's our first start was land bank, inventorying blighted property in conjunction with code enforcement, working with our code enforcement and making sure even our ordinances and zonings are correct, because they all play hand in hand together. And that's what we're going through right now, a process of recodifying our ordinances to update and make sure that we're where we need to be. But for us, I guess my sentiments are the same. It's property owners will purchase property that don't live here, and then it sits empty for years. And then it's like, okay, well, what do we left to do with it? What do we left to? You can't enter a property, or unless something's falling off the building is when you can actually do something. Other than that, you really can't do anything with that.
I've got one gentleman from Long Island, and Ron will attest to this. He bought a house on eBay in the west end of Washington, sight unseen. He can't find a tenant, and so now it's been broken into. All the wiring, all the copper plumbing has been stolen out of it. The doors don't lock, the windows don't lock, and he wants us to maintain his property for him. Well, we continue to cite him, and it's just a huge issue that you're allowed. And you can't stop him. Personal property rights, that guy has the right to buy that house. But then we are stuck with a property that we have to basically maintain, because this guy lives in Long Island. He can't see it from his front porch, but we drive by it every day. And we just need to work on strengthening the code enforcement process and the time it takes to get from citation to cleanup.
I just wanted to mention too, I think that what would be beneficial is if we had more incentives for individuals who acquire these properties to maintain them and to then sell them to personal property owners. So two areas of the county have more renters than personal property owners, and that's the city of Washington and also Charleroi. And as we see in those communities, there's a higher crime rate. And we see that through our 911 calls. So, and I've also heard from renters who have trouble with the absentee landlords meeting their needs as they're living in these structures. So if we could provide incentives for the individuals who are renting and the individuals who own those properties to allow the renter to acquire the property with tax incentives to the seller, incentives to the home buyer, we might be able to be proactive before we hit the blight button. Just as Senator Bartolotta said, we have to stop this before it grows. So if we could be creative with legislation, with some funding on a state level, that would be beneficial to our communities.
Yeah, I'm sitting here thinking, like, what does that even look like? I mean, do you have anything in mind, any suggestions?
I'm thinking incentives, tax incentives.
Right.
So the individuals who maybe they've inherited that property because the parents have gone into the nursing home, but if we provided them with some tax incentives, just like this individual from Long Island, and he's incurring debt, this property, he's paying taxes, this property's now losing its value. Right. If we could be forgiving or provide these tax incentives, he might be more incentivized to sell that property. And then you could clean it up, or you could rehab it. Not that one, at this point it's gone too far downhill. But if you could provide some incentives for the home buyer as well. There are a couple programs out there through Blueprints where they do savings match programs that allow individuals who are struggling to come up with a down payment on a property to have a match from our local banks, and that's another government program that assists. But if we could do more of that, that might assist both the buyer and the seller.
And maybe on that point, Commissioner, is a forgiveness of capital gains on a house that your parents have given to you, and now you sell that. Is
Mayor,
maybe
that's
from the state that
that's
we
exactly
can go
what
that way.
That's exactly what I was going to say. So if anybody's familiar with the Opportunity Zone program, federal program right now that's kind of getting off its feet or getting on its feet right now, and that's kind of that's the first thing I thought when you started talking about that, because not that there's a lot of taxes that somebody's going to pay on a sale of a dilapidated home or whatever, but there may be something there, and some type of credit on, again, from the state's perspective, we can only control the state taxes or whatever, but some type of credit that is based upon what the sale of that house is, and provides something of value to that property owner. Not that you want to, get a whole bunch of people. I mean, there are a lot of potential unintended consequences that we don't want to get into, but there might be something there that gets them moving a little bit quicker, because it's like these coal-fired power plants that are shuttered. They don't want to know what the negative value is of these with all the environmental contamination and things like that, because they think that's all of a sudden, once they know that, they put a value on that, they have to show that on their books. And that's why we work really hard with these companies to get them through the Act 2 clearance program to make sure that's not on there. But it's the same type of thing. They believe probably that they hold on to the property, and maybe the value will increase somehow through speculation. But if there's some way just to get it off their hands and maybe get it into a land bank or something like that through some type of tax incentive, there may be something there.
To your point, too, I mean, there are different columns of issues when it comes to blighted and abandoned properties. I actually, to your point too, Mayor, I ran into a woman in, where was this? It was in like Venice, California, a few years back. Oh, where you live? And I said, Southwestern PA. Oh, do you know where Denora is? I said, sure I do. She says, oh, I bought a house there on eBay. And I said, you're the people we hate. I said, she got it for like $6,000. I said, when's the last time you saw it? Oh, I've never been there. So I said, it's probably just, abandoned and weeds and grass growing and broken into. And I checked with the mayor and all the pipes are gone, everything else. But it just sits there. So I really think that we need, and I know, again, I'll repeat, we're pursuing legislation to demand that when people buy a property at a tax sale, and as a matter of fact, Senator Argel has legislation pending that addresses these types of things. Real estate that's bought at a tax sale, they have to prove that they don't have any tax liens anywhere in the Commonwealth. They have to prove that they've got someone who's available to call. They have to be much more responsible. And it makes it a lot easier for municipalities to track down these negligent owners, because that's just a horrific thing, that people are buying properties on eBay and just letting them sit there because it's cheaper to walk away and they don't have any ties to the community.
Senator, you hit it on the nose there, and I think, without mentioning what municipality is, but the county got sued because of a landowner who kept buying. He was irresponsible, and he ended up winning. Scott, I think you know that case well. And legislatively, something needs to be done to keep those type of people from keep going to tax sale after tax sale and purchasing these things and doing nothing with them. And
Well,
we
it's in the
ended up
works.
fighting it, but we ended up losing in court to him. And so that's a problem, and you hit it on the nose when you mentioned it there.
Senator Argel has a bill pending, so we're going to see what we can do to move that along quickly.
Can I just ask a question? I'm sorry. So what is her incentive to want to own that building? Is she getting a tax incentive? She has to pay taxes, right?
She should be paying taxes, absolutely. She should also be paying all the fines for breaking all the zoning laws in there, but she's not here. She lives in Sacramento.
Yeah. What's her
I mean,
incentive? It's
no,
online
nothing.
gambling.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
They think that they're going to buy it for $6,000 and sell it for
Flip it.
$9,000 or $10,000. Or, as the senator said, a flipper buys it.
After 5 years, you must think, good Lord, I'm paying taxes on this home in Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm. So they walk away.
But enough
They walk
people have done that in places like Lawrenceville or East Liberty that the values have just gone through the
West
roof.
Brownsville.
So that, Brownsville, another.
Well, just in addition, I think Monongahela, 2 years ago, passed a renters program, a renters inspection program. On the flip side of it, where there are actually heavy fines and fees for property owners who are not maintaining their property. I think it's something else that we can definitely look at as a model for Monongahela as far as renting properties.
Blighted and Abandoned Properties Conservatorship Act. I think it's Act 157, I believe, which allows municipalities to take is a bad word, but once properties fall into a certain state of disrepair, they don't meet certain code violations, et cetera, it's in the act, that they can be acquired by the municipalities. And is anyone aggressively using that in Washington County?
We used the conservatorship on the property on Allison Avenue that Bill was talking about that ended up being a home for a new home construction. So we have used that. It's a lengthy and a costly proponent from the city's perspective because of the solicitor's time that you have to go through to take those buildings through conservatorship. So it works, but it's not very timely and it's not cheap.
All right, if is there any other, we might as well open it up to, we've already started getting audience questions, so is there any other questions from the audience?
Yeah, I mean, it's finite, right? We don't have enough to do it all. So, what are the ways to stretch the dollars, right? So if you've got, I don't know what it costs to take down a 2-story, average home in 8th Ward. I don't know what it costs to do that. I assume that has to be bid. I assume that has to go through prevailing wage. I assume that has to go through a lot of things that take the price up from where it may. I mean, is there a way to get relief on prevailing wage or things like that so that you could do more with those dollars? With that $100,000, you could take down 37 houses versus 27 houses. If, for instance, the cost was just lower. There are probably contractors willing to do it lower, is my guess. I don't know the answer. But, I'm surmising at this point that if you could get some relief from things like that, it could be, could come down, those houses could come down cheaper.
We've seen that home demo number range from $7,500 to $14,000 for an average home demolition in the city of Washington. And a lot of that does come down to the regulatory side of the demolition of the structure, the disposal of the demolished material, and the prevailing wage that you have to go through.
I'm curious, county-wide, it sounds to me like the city probably has an inventory. Obviously, Canonsburg's going through that process. County-wide, whether it's commissioners or maybe it's more appropriate you, Bill, do we have an inventory, or do we really understand the extent of this process or this problem across the whole county?
Yeah, I would say no. Yeah. No, and that's one incentive that the land bank is offering to the municipalities who choose to participate. And it's a step, because it's cumbersome, it's time consuming, and it's somebody walking the blocks, and, these municipal officials are part-time, and they don't have the time to do it. So what we're offering is, as a participant in the land bank, we will come and do an inventory. We've done that with the 4 participating municipalities. We will do that for Canonsburg, who's planning to come on board. But as far as a countywide inventory, no, it does not exist.
A good example of working with Mariana was Mariana Borough, working with the ordinances and through the redevelopment authority and the local municipality. They identified 43 homes that needed to be addressed. And with the local share grant, I believe we had 20 on the list that was going to be done now, which means there's still 23 laying out there that needs to be done. Part of the problem you run into, though, also is that because of the rentals and landlords that are not in the area, taking a house down next to another house, if I own that house, I might put that back on the tax roll because I'm going to make a nice yard out of it. For example, maybe nothing gets built, but it becomes part of the homeowner. When I have a landlord that's not there, why would they want that extra lot to pay more taxes on? So there's a problem when you're looking at planning in some of the communities. What can we bring into a town? I use Mariana as an example. What do we bring into Mariana that can utilize those properties and help Mariana grow? That's what they need. If the jobs aren't there, so we're always working on the jobs. But that's an issue with the landlord issue. No one wants that extra lot. So you bring Habitat for Humanities in, maybe. There's a lot of things we look at. But how do you utilize that property once you tear a house down? It's a 2-step process. And that's the problem, land bank trying to work with the municipalities, trying to put together a plan downtown Denora, for instance. They have a plan that they're looking at. That helps grow the community after you tear down the Blight.
So part of it, Commissioner, I think from our perspective, our department is called the Department of Community and Economic Development, and there were some really smart people, I think it was in the Ridge administration, that decided to combine the Department of Commerce and the Department of Community Affairs together because they should work together. It really hasn't worked that way, and we have done a lot to really make the two areas within the department that I run work closer together and looking at things like impactful investments. So when we're making an investment in one particular community, municipality, third-class city, major city, whatever, we're looking at opportunities around there for combining other things. So we're doing business development projects and community development projects with the whole goal of making that area an interesting place to live. And the thing that's changed now, a lot of people talk about all the young people are moving to the cities. And again, I was just in Philadelphia, and they have young people moving in from New York City into Philadelphia, if you can believe that, because there are great opportunities there. But not every young kid wants to move into a big city. And that's the one thing, my big takeaway from the last 4+ years is we're seeing that more and more, and it's because of this. It's because of the fact that you can work anywhere. You can work as long as you have broadband, which is another discussion and something that we're trying to deal with. The governor wants to deal with the Restore PA initiative. But there are opportunities. These places are Washington, the smaller communities, Mariana, and other communities. My sister used to live in Prosperity, which I think is in Fayette. Is it in Fayette County? Is that that's Washington. But these places are more in play now than they have ever been. If we can bring broadband access to these places, but younger people want interesting opportunities. They want a lot of them want land. They want outdoor activities. They want a variety of different things. And if we can make sure that there's broadband opportunities, and we can make sure that these areas have interesting things going on, and the other takeaway that I've had is every place that I've ever gone to, and you guys probably see it, I think, when you're there, but whether it's a small municipality, a small city, third-class city, every place has some unique characteristic about it and a strength. And the really the people, and you guys have done it in Washington, but the smart elected officials in those areas, not that every elected official is smart as far as I'm concerned, so please make sure, any takeaway. But the ones that are really seeing some improvements and things happening are building from those strengths. And whether it's a waterfront, or whether it is, some historical significance, or whether there are brew pubs, wineries, distilleries, or whatever, like you guys have on the one. Yeah, exactly. But building from that area of strength, that is what's important. And if they can do that, if they can take care of the blight issues, and if they can build from their strengths, and you can, businesses might be more interested in going to areas like that, and maybe talent that's coming out of a W&J or something like that stays in the area rather than going to other places. Companies will come, and then you can increase the one thing I hear from you guys is you want to increase the amount of home ownership in your areas. The home ownership levels will increase, and good things can happen. But we have to make those investments, and we have to make significant investments in these districts. But it can happen. From what I've seen, it can happen anywhere in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, which is what I can talk about. I've seen places that are really down and out that have really started to make that change because they've worked and developed from their strengths.
Dennis, I'd just like to jump in here. You talked about W&J College, and one of the issues that the city has is our large proportion of tax-exempt properties with the college, with Washington Hospital, with the 42 churches in our downtown. But you've got, you talked about the historic aspect, and the farmers market and the Whiskey Rebellion in Washington has done a great job to attract the 2 distilleries and the brewery that we have. Other businesses are coming this way because of it. But you've also got Washington and Jefferson College and the Business Incubator in downtown Washington. So we've got a great collaboration there, but we need to do more to stop the unfunded mandates from the state and help with, some of these programs and RCAP with Triple and the stuff that they've done with rehabbing the old Y. So that was a project that could have been a demolition, and we've had an empty spot in our downtown, but they're rehabbing that using RCAP money. So, we thank that, thank the state for that, but, we need more opportunities like that.
I'd like to echo Secretary Davin's comments about investing in areas such as the universities and hospitals. California University is currently working with Bell Vernon Borough in Fayette County to repurpose a defunct water treatment facility into a river center hatchery, which will at some point become a travel destination, for a 5-county area. The students at the university and the surrounding schools will be able to come there, educate themselves. It's going to be a tourist attraction, looking for the team to build. They're working with Fish and Boat Commission, sportsmen's clubs, Fish in the Classroom, just to mention a few. So they're working towards, the positive side of it, and bringing that into the area.
Yeah, I'd like to, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I have 3 questions. First question on ordinances. And on the ordinances, we need the help of both Mr. Neal and Senator. When you go to, like, for instance, when you take, like, say, something simple, like somebody doesn't cut their grass and the grass is probably too high, and you go to court, and you get to court the day before you go to court, the grass is cut, the magistrate's going to throw that on. So the waiting process is about 4 weeks. So something simple like that, we need your help. There's a system that Mr. Phillips has basically presented. It's called ticketing. And I'd like you, if you have not seen it or understand it, take an opportunity to review it or actually sit down and talk to them about that. The boroughs of Pennsylvania had a webinar on it about, I think last month. But like I said, about a year ago, Mr. Phillips had a course on that, and he had it in, I think it was Monongahela, as we went to. And it's something that we need to address, because we're trying to get the boroughs to look, for the cities to look nicer, and it's cumbersome to go to the ordinances and get to the point, and right before you get to the court, basically the individual says, fix the problem. When it's basically the same person or persons, it's not a lot of people, but it's a few people that continue. Once they get, I get a free lunch is what I call it, and it takes 4 weeks to cut the grass, they're gonna start cutting the grass every 4 weeks, because they know that we don't have to cut it until the day before we go to the court, and if we cut, the magistrate's gonna throw it. So what it's doing is we're losing money, we're losing time, plus the appearance of the borough. I did want to address, I had the pleasure of working with Scott and also Rob, and it's taken 3 years to get our land bank in place. It's a twofold process. The first part of the process is getting them in place, but the second part, most people forget. You have to look at what the positive is. And the positive is basically the people in the community that you have that are taking care of their homes and also the yards. So what I did is I instituted, I had the pleasure of walking, I think it took 5 or 6 hours, I'm not sure, through the whole borough and looked at every single home that was in the borough that had a beautiful yard and a beautiful home. So I presented awards to those individuals. So I ignited a fire, a positive fire here, and we're addressing the negative one here. So it's basically going to at the same time work with us to basically project the whole image of basically having a community that you want to live in. So if we get the people that want to live in a community, that take care of the community, well, hopefully that's going to affect the ones that aren't. Second question I have, what is the statistics that you have that people own the properties that are blighted? Are they basically individuals that are relatives, or are they basically individuals that are business people? I'd like to see those statistics, because if you look at the statistics there, then you'll be able to address what part of the problem is. Is it individuals just coming in trying to make money, or is it individuals basically trying to make the community better? And then also you should institute something, I think for all of us, is what a community is and what it means to us, and try to institute that for the whole community. Say, you're living in our community, and our community is based on, to get anywhere in life, you have to have others helping each other. If you're not interested, I'm not saying putting it this way, but you just kind of just getting the thought. If you want to live in our community, we want people in the community to help each other and to make our community look nice, and we want to work together to do that. And kind of the ones that aren't, you kind of don't want to ostracize them, but basically saying, you know, this is what our community is made up of, people helping, and we want our communities to look nice. And if they're not looking nice, again, it's why are you coming in our community to make it not look nice, something along that line. Again, it's not right, but again, if you have, take the opportunity to talk to the mayor and also Mr. Phillips, because they've been giving me guidance over the couple of years of just getting a land bank, and again, it's going to be something that's going to help all of us. But again, I'm telling you, the simplest thing, like just giving an award to those people to taking care of the property, it's called the East Washington Beautiful Homes and Yards. I got so many calls and thanks, just something that simple. It's just amazing. So if you start both ends, you get the negative and the positive at the same time, but it's a thought for you all, so thank you.
I just have one question. So if you do identify somebody, you know, as we're walking these neighborhoods and we see a house that's in disrepair, you know, it pretty much falls to the nonprofits and the churches to go in there and try to help them. However, at that point, you know, because so many of them is, you know, Canonsburg, part-time zoning officer, non-existent right now, and I'm Mary Ann, you said they didn't have one. So basically, we're not funding at the bottom level anybody who's at all responsible for these communities. And so when you do see somebody's home in disrepair, there's no real incentive for anybody to knock on the door and say, gee, Mrs. Smith, you know, I see that you're having some problems at your house. Or has anybody talked to you about what's available? Or, well, my husband died last year and, you know, I'm getting half the social welfare now, so I can't afford to keep this property up. So at that point, that's when they start to go into blight, because many of the people who own their own houses, they just don't have money to keep them up. And at that level, we don't have people on the ground who are able to talk to them and say, look, there's money out there. We're waiting till they're falling down and those people end up in some crazy nursing home somewhere. And then we're spending thousands and thousands of dollars to tear the house down. I'm not sure, you know, are any of the things that we're talking about here, are they based at that bottom level where people are identifying families getting into problems in these communities that don't have work, and they're also not getting, you know, support by the government. And I'm not saying everybody should get support from the government, but I am saying if we could spend $500 making their front steps safe, why would we spend $40,000 tearing the house down in 10 years? So I guess, you know, something to think about.
Yeah, that's a very good point. You know, I do think the city of Washington is in a unique position, countywide, really, to have a full-time, I assume you're full-time, a full-time code enforcement officer. You know, so, and that's potentially something we could look at on, you know, some of the best practices through code enforcement that have worked in the city. You know, maybe improving some of the things that haven't worked. And I don't know if you care to share any of that, and potentially what we could do to help other communities do similar things.
Yeah, sure. The first thing I try to do is make contact with the owner if possible, either by phone call, letters, citations. Sometimes that's all it takes is talking to the owner to get the property brought into compliance. Some owners have demolished their own properties, which is great. Saves us a lot of money and time. Some others you do have to cite, and some others you do have to demolish the property. So it just depends on the owner, really. The hardest part for us is a lot of times identifying who the owner is. Sometimes like a trust will be set up with, I guess, a blind trust. You know, the owner will list the address of the blighted property as their address. So you send something to the owner and it just goes nowhere. So it's very difficult sometimes to identify who the owners actually are. So I think it'd be helpful if we had some kind of contact information, either phone numbers or verifying that there are actual individuals buying these properties and not just some blind trust with no one.
You know, one of the questions just a second ago was in regard to statistics of the inventory. And we heard earlier that there really isn't a countywide inventory. So I don't know that we could fully look at the statistics. But I'm just curious, from your experience, do you see trends in the blighted property? And is it along the lines of absentee owners and things like that?
It's assorted. There's definitely deceased owners that have passed away and have let the property go to taxes. There are absentee landlords, and there are some people that just don't have the money to do anything with the property and just kind of, you know, letting it go. So it just depends on the owner, really.
Tim, there's just let me interrupt there. We talk about that question about who can go to that door. You know, there is a process if we really start getting on top of it right now. Redevelopment Authority works with every community. Rob has certain communities. If you don't have a local code enforcement person, you have local representatives that run your little government, whether it's a borough, township, or city. And basically working through that process. If you had a question, you should be able to go to your I served 16 years as supervisor in Chartiers, and we know best about what happens in our community. So working through that process, there's a channel already built in that through your local representative, if we get that, then maybe we can initiate a program through redevelopment. I won't put words in your mouth, but they go to their local representative who can bring all the resources that we've been talking about today into the mix. So I think we maybe want to encourage 66 communities in Washington County. Knowing the statistics on a countywide basis may be good, but really it's going to come right back to local municipalities. You initiate, you reach out, we have a conduit there to bring in other resources that are available. And so I think we might want to just as a countywide encourage that process maybe to really jump into play, identify, reach out, use the conduits we have to the state, to the county, and to the federal. And if we start working on that all together, get the thought out there, maybe we can make something move quicker. It's not an easy job, but it's something we've been working on. Let's get, maybe that's good reason to have this meeting today.
Commissioner, I'd like to say and Representative O'Neill brought it up about the inventory. Our Citywide Development Corporation has inventoried multiple neighborhoods in the city. And it was as simple as we got some high school kids on a Saturday and fed them donuts and pizza and said, listen, it's a three-part thing. It's either a nice house, it needs repair, or it needs tore down. The houses that need repaired, we went back to and said, are you aware of the Redevelopment Authority's home rehab program? Are you aware of the Dreamers? Are you aware of the Next Step? I don't know that we've done a good enough job of getting back to these people in year 2 and year 3 saying, have they taken advantage of any of these programs? But I think the inventory was a good first start and mapping these out. And is there clusters of houses, as you talked about in the Highland Ridge area, is there clusters that we can go in there and look at taking 3 or 4 houses and putting 2 in their place? So it's really set us up for our comprehensive plan as far as how are we going to handle these blighted properties by just looking at the inventory of our housing stock.
And Scott, that's exactly the process we're in right now. It's as the group are walking and looking at houses, is sometimes we'll knock on the next door and find out they'll know the story of the building, and we'll get that information, and then based on that, we know what direction as far as how to get in contact with that individual for that house. But I mean, like I said, is walking through the neighborhood. I've lived here, I've grown up here, and walking through the neighborhood in certain houses that I didn't even know existed are existing, but getting that inventory now, once the list is complete, now we can work with Rob's group and say, okay, here's the ones that we want to tackle. Here's the ones that we can, the programs that you have. Hey, here's the program. Are you interested in this type of program? But you're absolutely right. And that's where the process we're in right now.
Great. Thank you, Harlan, for mentioning that. You're absolutely right. When it really comes down to it, this is the responsibility of local municipalities first and foremost, because let's face it, they're the ones that are truly going to be involved in addressing it. But really, my thought is this is something that we can have an impact across all levels of government. But you're right. Ultimately, you still got to go back to the local municipality. For a local resident, that is absolutely the first place to turn. So, I do want to be respectful of everybody's time. We got about 10 minutes, and I know we got a few audience questions, but I do want to wrap up right at noon, just so everybody's aware. Patrick.
Yeah, I know we've used the term blight today, and it's used in our statutes, but yet there's no uniform definition for it. I think that shows what a comprehensive problem it is. I know there's a number of legislative proposals to define the word blight. Is that moving forward? And I think as we use that today, it shows just what a problem it is that we can't even define that term in our
The,
statute.
the short answer is yes, and I know the senator
HB
has.
407, House Bill 407, Representative Masser is working on the definition of blight.
And I believe we just voted that out of the House, so it's sitting at the Senate.
But you're so right. I mean, it's pretty arbitrary. So we really need to hone in on that and make sure we've got a clear definition of what that is.
And that's so true, because I don't know if you're familiar with the Galleria shopping mall. Several years ago, it was declared blighted, and they tried to get money to rehab that. I'm sure Secretary Davin remembers that.
We actually fought it. That was. But they qualified as blighted under redevelopment law, state redevelopment law.
I think, Mayor Putnam has said it, and Rob has talked about it. Really, I think what it comes down to at the community level is it's the collaboration, right? The Dreamers Company is working with CDC, is working with the City of Washington, is working with the Redevelopment Authority, is working with the county commissioners. We've definitely seen a role of, when we're out there, we're also walking the streets, right? And I think, as this gentleman just said, a lot of these folks sort of need a liaison, right? It's not easy to apply for the $24,500 loan forgiveness, right? There's a lot of pages, and there's tax returns, and there's things you got to turn in, and they kind of just throw their hands up like, this is too hard for me. So I think one of the things that we're looking to do from the Dreamers Company is to sort of be that liaison, right? I'm pretty well versed in this stuff. I still don't understand it perfectly, but I know how to talk to Rob in his terms, and I know how to talk to Scott in his terms, and then come back to that person and say, we think you qualify, let's help you pull together what you need to have. And maybe we need to have a little forum where we can pull 3 or 4 of these homeowners in that we think we've already kind of pre-qualified, and let's sit down and do, like Blueprints helps you do your taxes, let's sit down and help them do the form for the access grant, or for the rehab grant, or for wherever it may be. But there needs to be someone kind of in the middle that talks both languages, because the folks you're talking to aren't necessarily the ones that are well-versed in some of these things. So there's a role there. I mean, we're hoping to fill it from a nonprofit standpoint, because it's access to money, and we have the resources to do the labor. We're hoping to connect those things, but I think those collaborations, there's not a problem that gets solved better than when 5 or 6 agencies get together and collaborate, put the egos at the door, and let's just get stuff done. And I think that's where these things succeed.
Yeah, great point. Thanks for that. That you're absolutely right. That's some access to some of these programs is sometimes the challenge in of itself. Yeah. So any other?
Just to sort of throw it in here, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this, because the governor's Restore PA plan has been mentioned a couple of times. I'm not sure if people know what that is exactly. It's a potential borrowing $4.5 billion to provide a lot of these different services that have been discussed, blight remediation and things like that, brownfields. I do have legislation along with Senator Pat Stefano that would provide lifting the moratorium on drilling under state forest lands, not on, no one wants a gas rig on top of a forest, but it would lift a moratorium that's been imposed now for 4 years, and that would provide immediately about $1 billion in signing bonuses, because there's about $2.2 million of state forest lands, 1.5 million of those acres sits atop Marcellus and Utica play. 930,000 of those acres are accessible from up to 3 miles away with the new technology. And if we lift that moratorium, we could really reap the benefits of $1 billion in signing bonuses and about $1 billion thereafter in royalties. And with the plan that we have with that legislation, those funds would be managed by the Commonwealth Financing Authority, and it would go towards conservation efforts. Blight remediation is one of them. It would also, those grants would be available to land banks and redevelopment authorities to do just what we're talking about right here, besides a list of other things. Critical flood control, I'm sure everybody in this room is very aware of those problems. Stormwater infrastructure, and abandoned mine reclamation. So I just wanted to throw that out there before we got going, because there are options out there without massive tax increases, without massive borrowing of $4.5 billion with that debt service included. Just wanted to throw that out there as an alternative. Those are things we're talking about. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Senator. So any final questions before we wrap up? So, well, Secretary, would you like to say anything finally?
No, I think I really appreciate the opportunity to be here, and this is great for me to come to Washington County again, commissioners. All right, it's my favorite county. Is anybody familiar? Yeah, right. Did you have it on? Yeah, right.
Good answer. Good answer.
Today, other days, I have other favorite counties, but my favorite county today. But I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about these things. It's so critically important. And again, what I spoke about before, Washington, you guys probably aren't the best example of what we're talking about because you've done such a great job of dealing with blight. So that hats off to you guys. You got your challenges, but you guys are doing a great job. But there are so many areas around the state that I see that it is just, it's mind-boggling when you look at the level. Again, like in the Mon Valley, Keysport, Duquesne, Clareton, places like that, in some cases, some of these places have 10% of the population they had 30 or 40 years ago. Think about that. Aliquippa, good one. Yeah, and they've done a pretty good job of trying to deal with it, but it's just massive, and more properties are coming on the blight roll, so that's bad. And the senator mentioned, the legislation. The governor's also proposing legislation, as I mentioned, Restore PA, which would do a lot of the things that we feel after crisscrossing the state for the last over 4 years that are needed throughout the state. And I think what's good about this is, again, this is the United States of America, which is the great thing about this, and the fact that we have the ability, and we're going to have a great opportunity to discuss this. And I've had the pleasure of working with the legislature for the last 4 years. When I initially started working with the legislature, I wasn't sure I'd use the word pleasure, but it has absolutely been a pleasure. But it's great to be able to have this I don't even know if I want to call it a debate, but a discussion about this. We know what the issue is. We know that there are some opportunities to take care of this issue. What is the best way to go about this? And the most important thing is, what is the best way to get the votes, right, Senator, Representative? I mean, that's really what it comes down to. How can we get this thing done? But I think there are a lot of great people around the state and our legislature, that are really passionate about the things that need to be done. So we're going to figure this out. One way or another, we are going to figure this out and do the right thing by our constituents, you guys, to make sure that we deal with these significant issues. And I just want to thank Representative O'Neill for putting this together. Thank you so much, because it's important to get these things out in the open. Look at what works, what still, folks that still have issues, but then other things that are really important to constituents. So thank you very much.
Representative, I just want to say a special thank you to Secretary Davin, because Washington County has fared extremely well at receiving state funding for a number of economic development projects, and you've been very generous with your time since you became the secretary, and it doesn't go unnoticed, and we just want you to know how much we appreciate the efforts you put in to helping us accomplish our goals here in Washington County.
And I will echo the thanks. I very much appreciate that you personally came to this roundtable to participate. It means a lot to me, it means a lot to the senator, I know, and to the commissioners. And thank you, Senator, for being here. Commissioners, thank you all for coming. I do think this is one of the key issues facing our community, and we need to ensure we continue to move forward beyond this meeting. As I do in my approaches with many of the events that I hold, this is the first step. The first step is understanding the problem and the potential to where we could potentially go from here. So I'm excited to work on this issue with the people around the table and others. I know the meeting itself, the roundtable itself, was extremely valuable for me. I got a number of notes on things I need to begin to research on whether or not I could potentially do something at the state level. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for participating. Have a great day. Let's go solve some blight. So. All right.